Hey, welcome back to the What the? Can we do a redo? No, we can't. Welcome back to the Devoxx Belgium live Q&As. This grand morning, we're here with Viktor Klang. Thank you for being here, Viktor.
Thank you, Nicolai.
And for those who don't know you, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I think I might be most recently known for my work on stream gatherers for Java 21 and 22 now. Oh, 22 and now 23, and now we'll see for 24 how it goes. But I've done a lot of stuff before that in the streaming space and distributed system space and concurrency space.
And now you're looking to go into a new space.
Yeah.
The most beloved of all. I heard, so there's a talk here. It's called, I think, Serialization in New Hope.
Yeah.
You gave it yesterday with Brian. So what's that about?
Yeah, so serialization might not be the most exciting topic for a lot of people, but it's an interesting problem because today, more than any time before, our programs are really communicating with external systems. So being able to take your data and being able to send it over the wire somewhere and receive data and mapping it onto your objects is just much more prevalent and useful. But Java serialization has been sort of tied into its own specific format and its own specific set of functionality. So
sorry to interrupt you. Maybe it makes sense to clarify. So we have Java serialization, which is like a very specific way to do it.
Yeah.
But when you say serialization, you don't just mean that byte buffer-based thing, right?
Yeah. So it's one of those cases where all the nice words have been overloaded 100 times, but just the notion of being able to take your in-memory instance of a class and turn it into bytes.
Yeah.
Be it via strings or whatever, but turn it into a byte stream so you can send it across a network boundary or to a file or somewhere else.
But when we're homing in, this could also be a JSON string.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
Is bytes.
Yeah, absolutely. So JSON, XML, there's probably 50 plus useful things that people are using. So serialization has had an interesting feature set supporting some pretty advanced capabilities. Like the plan was to take objects and essentially teleport them to another JVM and have them land running with the same identity and the same structure. It turns out that that's a really, really difficult problem, not only for correctness sake, but also from a security standpoint. So Brian and others, Stuart and other colleagues and other people in the community have been looking into what could a successor to serialization look like, and what do we do with the feature set? Because I think, does it need to be only Java, then might not be permissive enough. So it would be nice to be able to just take Java objects and just send them over JSON. So just trying to condense the feature set. So what we have arrived at is a very small addition to the programming model. Two annotations and a single static method call that allows developers to define their external structure as data. So some Java developers might remember externalizable, which was a feature add-on to serialization.
Is that the serialization proxy pattern?
No, that's the
else, right?
read, resolve, and write, replace thing.
That was
But read external and write external was a way to be able to do this, but they chose a different path at that time. So it's essentially representing data as operations. So write int, write long, write object. So you essentially keep a list of operations that you want to do. But it's really hard for someone else to be able to introspect that because it's locked within a method. You don't know what's going to happen. But instead of doing that, we're switching it around to represent data as data. So you have the structure as a reified, you have an instance of the structure, so you can actually loop over it, you can inspect it, you can check the types, the names at runtime, and that makes it so much easier to map something to JSON, which is a lot with names, right? Attribute names, but some other protocols or wire formats, they might be positional. So you don't even have the names in the payload at all. So you need both. You need both the ordinal of the data,
Yeah.
but you also need the name because otherwise you're not covering a huge part of the use case. So what was an interesting observation was we have this, I call it sort of the humble parameter list. So every single Java developer has written a parameter list to something. And what does that do? Well, it's essentially saying that my external contract to someone who's calling me is this order with these types with these names.
Yeah, well, the names are not visible to the outside, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, there is well, it's not a secret, right? But if you compile with dash parameters,
good point,
you reify those attributes, names. So what we can do then is if we lean into the parameter list, so a constructor says that, okay, so coming from an external, it doesn't need to be from an external VM, it could be from a caller, external caller. This is my types, names, and order. And why can't we do the other way around? Because we can take an object and pass it into a parameter list and get a new object out. So how do we get that initial object back again? Because if we want to send it, clearly we need to be able to pull it out.
Yeah, so you need both ways, right?
You need,
so
it needs to be bidirectional.
And like generally speaking, most like method calls and constructor calls are kind of destructive in the sense that you don't get things back. You can call a constructor with some parameters and then there's some different internal representation and there's no way that you can express in the language usually. I'll give you the same things back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So an interesting thing there is if you look at the more recent edition of records, you sort of get that, right?
Yeah. When you say data is data, you like records.
Exactly. So it's really good for records because they're frozen in time. They're a snapshot themselves. So you know exactly that the thing that you're getting out is the thing that you put in. So that's good. But what does that mean for regular classes, even classes with inheritance hierarchies? So there's been a lot of work on what's called deconstructors or deconstructing patterns. So that's a way of doing exactly what I said, being able to define the inverse of a constructor. So how do I get those values back out again? So if you have both of those, you're able to take data, put it in and create one single instance, and you're able to take that instance and get all of the data back, then we have this bidirectional flow. So what we've done is take that idea paired with how do you signal that this constructor or this deconstructor is intended for externalization purposes. So adding an annotation for that. And so serialization, just as a tangent, but serialization has had this issue for a while where it's sort of invasive. It reaches into an object, it pulls stuff out.
I mean, it's both. It's magic and it's curse. Right? Like it promises to do all those things without you knowing, and then it does all those things without you knowing.
And the difficult thing there as well is that when you're reviewing the code, if you're extending from a class that is implementing serializable, you might not even know that it's implementing serializable. You're just extending a class. So you don't even know when you review the PR that, hey, this is actually going to get reached in by serialization and stuff is getting put. So it's really difficult to actually see that it's going on. So what we tried to do is instead of having this accessibility busting going from the outside in, we decided let's have it as an opt-in instead. So if you have a private constructor that you only want to use for what we call marshalling now, marshalling externalization purposes, you can annotate that, and in your static class initializer, you can call a method called register, where you provide the method handle lookup. So you provide it with the access control. So you can opt into exposing your non-public members.
Okay, maybe it makes sense to look at that for a second. First of all, you said marshalling. Which part exactly is the marshalling part? So you would say, then also, so I mentioned a few things: the static initializer and the class, and the constructor and a deconstructor. Can you maybe walk us through? For those who can because we don't have any code to show here, so let's try to.
We're typing in the air.
Yeah, exactly. Let's try. Let's try. So see constructor, deconstructor. So there's two questions basically. So what exactly is marshalling, and that other step? And I don't know which is the best order to explain. I'll leave it to you.
So there are two primary interfaces, or from sort of use cases.
Yeah.
On the first hand, you have what users or Java developers do, which is they declare classes, they implement them, they do all the work around designing the contracts, etc. And the interface between that and marshalling are these two annotations called marshallable, or marshaller and unmarshaller.
Okay.
So designing or designating which one of them should be used for marshalling purposes, in which direction, and also this register call. So that's the only sort of connecting surface between the just run-of-the-mill, just type your class. And then on the other hand, you have sort of the integration side. So when you're able to take a class and understand its external structure, you now want to be able to use that. Like, okay, so how do I get the structure? So you have marshal and unmarshal as a part of that, the two methods, which clearly go in both directions.
Yeah.
And they consume and return, or one consumes and one returns, what's called a marshallable or marshaled.
Per detailed names TBD, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy for all of the names to sound the same.
Yeah.
But it's the snapshot of that object.
So marshalling means taking an object with state and turning it into a marshaled.
Yeah, which is the structural representation.
Yeah, and that can then be JSON or byte code written to bytes, or I mean, JSON will end up as bytes by a string, but I mean that could be binary format.
Yeah.
And so you're saying that this marshaled object has all the information that basically anybody who wants to serialize objects out there might want to turn them into the to turn that into the format of their choosing. Okay.
And then, of course, in the other direction, you're taking the marshaled instance and you're getting an instance back of the same type with the same values. So that's an important distinction, because what we're foregoing here is the preservation of object identity. That's
probably good.
Yeah, because it's a real tricky thing to preserve in all cases.
Yeah.
Stuart had a really interesting presentation yesterday about how to deal with circularity in serialization. And a lot of the problems stem from having to try to preserve the object identity in that case. And there's also so when you have marshal and unmarshal, you essentially, if you string them together, so if you have an instance, you marshal that instance, and then you unmarshal it immediately. You're not even going through JSON. You're not. You've essentially implemented clone.
Yeah.
So
funny, there's a second cloning shortcut I hear about in this conference. The other one was deconstructors, constructors, and just an empty with block, basically.
Exactly.
That's funny. Okay.
So the difference between using explicit constructors and deconstructors is that with marshalling, you as the caller don't need to know which constructor to use and which deconstructor to use, because that's using what the class author designated to use. Right. Okay.
Interesting.
So it's a bit of a trade-off, right? But it's interesting how you get additional features just out of the same feature.
Yeah. Brian said in his talk, find the primitive, right, and like find the right minimum operation, and you find a good one low enough down, then this happens where like it just starts doing things like, oh wait, that's also pretty nice actually. We didn't plan for this, but because we chose it well, it now does this.
Yeah. Okay. And it's, to be honest, it's a super simple feature. But it's taken. Can you like going from the complexity of serialization to the simplicity of marshalling? It's orders of magnitude in terms of complexity.
Yeah. So let's talk about that maybe a little bit. So because Brian in his talk again, I already gloated over the talk yesterday. Like it was a short part of the keynote, but it was really, really good. Postcards from the peak of complexity. And I have a date with Brian now. We're going to have this conversation later. We're going to record it, and we're going to show it on Friday afternoon, pre-recorded. I'm going to bug him more about this. But one thing he pointed out, damn it, lost my train of thought in the middle of the
Well, it was a really important thing, though.
Yeah, it was really important.
Yeah. Let's see.
Oh, right, complexity, right. He said, when this virtuous collapse, where something complex becomes surprisingly simple if you keep iterating on it, the big ingredient to that is to remove requirements and to say, actually, you know what, we don't need to do this. So one thing I already mentioned is serialization tries to preserve identity. And pulling that out, I can only imagine, meaning that you serialize and deserialize, and what you get back out is the same. Like it should be like equals the same, which probably sounded good back in the days. I don't know. With hindsight, which is 2020, it sounds like an awful way to make your life harder.
Oh, yeah, it's a really difficult thing to pull off.
And so you moved that requirement, which made things a lot easier. Can you point at other things, things where you said, okay, this is the difference between marshalling and serialization, and that's why it's simpler?
Yeah, so I think one other big one is no circularity. Because when you don't have object identities, what does circularity mean?
Can you even have circles then?
Right.
Okay.
But it's
but if you don't have identity, but you do have a circle, it would expand an infinite tree, right?
Well, it depends on what it means, right? So let's say that you replace it with a structural equivalent of itself. Then how do you observe that it is a cycle without introspecting the object itself? Like you would have to go through equals and try to do that. But if you look at, I think in my experience, even if you do, so JSON doesn't represent cycles. But what you can do is if you want to, you can represent cycles above or inside JSON by having identifiers and at a higher level dealing with that.
You reconstitute the cycle,
But then you're in control. Yes. You decide how to deal with.
You is in this case the person writing the marshalling, unmarshalling to JSON part.
Exactly.
So not the person not the author of the class that gets compiled, gets serialized to JSON, but the person who's writing the JSON serialization. They will then decide, do we want circles? If yes, how?
Well, not
cycles.
Yeah, well, not necessarily even at that level, because if you get the JSON, you as the application developer, you can decide how you want to interpret that JSON. Right? So if you have business keys or any other identifiers in there that would lead you to be able to detect that even if this looks like a tree, it's actually representing a cycle, you could decide how you want to handle that.
Yeah, true.
But when you're pushing it down into a library or a box of functionality, it's really hard for the caller to be able to do anything about that. So I think by removing the object identities, we sort of remove the need to be able to support cycles.
Okay, so it's the other way than what I said. It's actually better if the application developer and not the JSON library developer can decide how to handle that in that specific case.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so it's getting a little bit noisy, so I think we want to shut this down quickly. But we have this one joke that I need to come back to. You already know what this is.
I know what it is.
Right. So we have made this. So people are starting to call this what you're doing, Klang marshalling.
Yes.
So how do you feel about being associated with one of the most abominable features Java ever added? I mean, which is not marshalling. That's good, but it will always be in the vicinity of serialization.
Nope.
Are you willing to take on that role?
I think a feature should always be bigger than its. I wouldn't even call myself the creator of this thing. I'm just the facilitator of the bringing into reality.
That's what Brian did here. He was like, no, I'm not going to put my name on that.
I'll let Victor handle it and put his name on it. No,
exactly.
What I'm hoping though is that this will lead to more innovation on top, right? Being able to have multiple wire formats supported out of the box. Since we don't deal with I/O at all, that can be done completely separately. It doesn't matter if you want to send your JSON over TCP or to files or whatnot. So I think having this shared language and the shared structure to be able to introspect and either generate or parse based on that structure, we can have much more innovation on top of that than if we were to create a more constrained feature that...
but when you say out of the box, you don't mean like necessarily within the JDK, right?
Exactly. I guess out of the box, it means different things to different people. But I would hope that we would be able to support... And we haven't decided that yet. Like, what do we support? Is it the interoperation with old serialization? Or is it... JSON? Is it CSV? I don't know, right? I think
CSV, very, very common in the in the microservice world.
Well, if you're starting out, just being able to convert it into text and being able to represent it in a terminal or something might be good enough. But
that's actually really, really correct. It's very important. Jokes aside, I think when we talked about data-oriented programming to Angelos a couple of days ago, we also figured out my personal idea here is that when you start out programming, you're dealing with simple data because you don't have a real business case yet. So you don't know how to create like a banking app or whatever. So what you're doing is reading files locally, maybe grabbing something from the internet. And so yeah, you're actually right. Like CSV might actually be useful there, even if it's not maybe less useful to the enterprise developer. Although if you become enterprise enough, CSV becomes important again.
You might even be able to take a command line parameter list and convert that into an object, or it could be anything, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, so last question, timeline.
Timeline, yeah, that's a great question. I can't necessarily comment on that. But what I can say that one of my next steps is to try to start to prepare a JEP for this and see where we can take this.
So JD can enhance the proposal. If you start working on that now, there is a chance, not now, but like these days, I would say not 24. That's out of the question. And then 25 is already kind of like cutting it short. So maybe around that time we get a first preview. I guess. Is this something that would go through preview?
Yeah, we haven't decided on the actual. But I don't know what the opportunities is. I think it would be good to get people to try it out and to provide feedback as early as possible. So I don't know if we can make it available in some sort of separate early access.
But the previews also work great for what we call Klang streams. So stream gatherers, but I took a pawn serialization on him. So maybe it's nice to give him the cool stream gatherers as well. We talked earlier that should be the Java Klang package. Like your name is just too good for all of these things. Okay, any final words on this, or should we just cut it here?
No, I think we're good. I'm super stoked about the possibilities here with marshalling, and I think that there's some really interesting talks to consume for those who haven't been able to see them in.
So that talk, Serialization, A New Hope, I think, is probably already live on the Devoxx channel. It will definitely go live in the next days or weeks on the Java channel too. You can watch it wherever you prefer, and then you can have a deeper dive about all of this with Viktor and with Brian. And yeah, thank you very much for being here, everybody. We have Stefan Johansson on later. There's like an 80% chance I got his last name right because we have two Stefans, and it's hard for me to keep the names apart. I'm very sorry, Stefan, if you see this. He's going to be here at 5 p.m. Central European time or 3 p.m. UTC to talk about garbage collection Java from Java 8, all the improvements, and to give you a better understanding, or like a good understanding of some trade-offs and what to pick when and what to look into. So that will be quite a change of pace from this, and I'm looking forward to that. Thank you very much for being here, Viktor.
Thank you, Nicolai.
And I'll see you around. Bye.